The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Or what can one give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay each one according to his conduct." The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Praise be Jesus and Mary. Sometimes people say, why doesn't God give some big visible sign, to make his presence known to the world? Well, in reality, he has done that sometimes. Just think of the big miracle of October 13th in Fatima, which was visible to 70,000 people. But ordinarily, God makes his presence felt to the world, you could say to that part of the world that is currently in ignorance and closed to him. He gives a display of his presence and of his power through the saints. And in the last century, one of the saints who was particularly just brilliant, so to speak, as a sign, as a light in the midst of so much darkness, and who gave such a great display of God's own sanctity and love and power at work, was Padre Pio. A special gift to the last century, to our times. Times of great apostasy from the truth, of great denial of truth, of shipwreck, spiritual shipwreck. Here our Lord offered a saint who was just an incredible proof of his presence and of his power in action. The life of Padre Pio starts out in the last part of the 19th century, and at a very early age he began to perceive the call to his vocation, but he himself describes those first years as a battle, because he felt his heart entirely divided between, you could say, that pull toward the world, toward worldly things, which our Lord allowed him to feel, but at the same time, just the strong call toward religious life. And once he had this vision of an angel who took him onto a battlefield, and he saw that on the one side of the battlefield there were the angels, on the other side there were the devils, the demons, in the middle there was the devil himself, and he was apparently called in the vision to go and fight the devil himself with the assistance of the angels. And he realized that there was a sign given him to understand the real battle to which he was called. But the angel, apparently his guardian angel was accompanying him in this vision, said, put your trust in God's strength. Here you have the angels to help you. With God's aid you will win. And so he actually goes forth in the vision and wins the battle. Obviously it's a sign, a vision given to help him understand, but he was triumphant in that trial and denied those earthly desires, renounced them, and embraced the vocation and entered into the religious life. And from a very early age, so very early on in his religious life, he began to make rapid progress not only in the spiritual life as is ordinarily lived by religious, but right up to the highest degrees of contemplation, entered into a true mystical life. And in 1910, he received the stigmata. Our Lord appeared to him and left on his hands and in his feet and on his side the very wounds of his passion. And Padre Pio, as we know, bore these wounds patiently for 50 years. Those wounds were unique. We know the stigmata are the wounds of Christ, but his was such that there were holes right through his hands and his feet. Once, later on in life, Padre Pio had he felt a natural embarrassment because of these stigmata. So unlike others who maybe faked the stigmata to gain attention, Padre Pio just felt a natural embarrassment. He always tried to hide them. So there was no, in this way our Lord, provided him with a means of never seeking his own glory in them. He always felt embarrassed over them. But he offered them, bore them patiently. And once it happened that a doctor had to examine him, and for some reason, he had to be put under a general anesthetic for some sort of operation. But he told the doctor, the condition is that you don't look at the stigmata. Well, the doctor just did just that when Padre Pio was under the stigmata. And that doctor testified that when he took Padre Pio's hand in his own and looked at the stigmata, he realized that he was looking right through his hand. He had a hole right through his hand. So he had real wounds, borne with patience for 50 years. And that patient suffering, that patient union with Jesus crucified, together with his incredible life of prayer, his life was characterized by the recitation of the rosary, just rosary after rosary. In addition to that, he had a mystical gift by which he could recite the rosary basically continuously. Even when confessing, even when doing other things, he was able to continue reciting interiorly the rosary. Once someone asked him who he was, it was just sort of in a few words a definition of yourself, and he just said, "I am a poor friar who prays." His life as a confessor is that which characterizes him particularly in his pastoral activity. He heard an incredible number of confessions. 1962 is one of the years in which there's actually they kept records of the number of confessions, and so one had to actually register to go to confession to him. And in that year, over 100,000 people went to confession to Padre Pio. That's sort of an average of about 270 a day. In his early years as a confessor, he would spend up to 19 hours a day in the confessional, so something humanly impossible. He also had, as we know, a special gift of reading of hearts. So when you went to confession to Padre Pio, you knew that he knew your soul better than you knew it yourself. So you couldn't hide anything. And if something, slipped your mind, he would simply tell it to you. But he was also very precise but brief. So the confessions were never drawn out with him. It was very, very clear, to the point, clear, precise advice given, and then you would leave. Also an incredible spiritual director, thousands and thousands of the letters that he wrote to his spiritual sons and daughters. If you go to San Giovanni Rotondo, you'll see there's a room in the museum where they have the letters received in just 1 year. It's a whole wall, an entire wall with thousands, it's something like 60,000 letters received in 1 year. Well, obviously, as you can imagine, he couldn't open them all, but he, through a special gift that our Lord gave him, he knew basically the intentions or the requests even without opening them. Toward the end of his life, someone asked him, if he could leave a spiritual testament, leave us something that we can think of after your death? And he said, simply love Our Lady and make her loved. So he gave display in that of his great love for Our Lady. In fact, he lived most of his life as a friar in the little friary of Our Lady of Grace, which is in San Giovanni Rotondo. So he spent many hours before that image, but even more hours, in fact, his whole life, always in her presence, reciting the Holy Rosary. So no doubt that Our Lady herself led this friar and priest to the heights of sanctity and conformity with Jesus. We have a special connection with Padre Pio in our institute because our founder was actually one of his servers. He used to serve the Mass of Padre Pio, and Padre Pio himself directed him to his Franciscan vocation. And so that's one of the reasons why he has been chosen as a special patron of the Franciscans of the Immaculate. Let us praise and thank our Lord for His grace working in the lives of the saints, who for this reason are living beacons to His presence, to His love, to His mercy. Let us also learn from His example how to be constant and persevering in prayer, especially in our union with Our Lady and in the recitation of the Holy Rosary. And also let us learn from him the love of the sacraments, the love of the sacrament of confession, and the love of the Holy Mass. He was so loved because of the way he celebrated Mass. He would rarely preach, but people would still flock to that little church, by the thousand, just to see the way he celebrated Mass. It was, someone would say, as if Jesus himself was upon the altar. Praise be Jesus and Mary.